Hello Summoners and welcome back to another ProGuides video. My name is Nathan Ng and today we'll be talking about our predictions for the War Champions going into patch 11.18. While there are a ton of buffs and nerfs each patch, it can be pretty difficult to actually know what's gonna change and what's actually gonna stay the same. Sometimes a seemingly huge nerf just brings a god tier champion down to the S tier, and there's still plenty OP. Other times what seems like a minor 2 base AD reduction just causes the champion to drop off the rift. So we're here to steer you clear away from what we think are going to be the worst champions in each role this patch. Starting off with top lane, we have Gangplank. Gangplank has always been in a poor state overall in solo queue. In the early game, he's very susceptible to champions that can close the gap and harass him from range. And while his scaling is kind of insane, it takes very good mechanics to actually use that scaling impactfully in games. For that reason, anywhere outside of the top of the ladder, he's almost always a pretty bad pick. The one thing that he did have going for him was his Q counting as a melee attack. And with that, the poke from his Q could actually be pretty OP when paired with Grasp and the Corrupting Potion. But with it being swapped to count as a range ability on 11.17, it has definitely hit his laning skills hard, making a hard champ to play even more difficult to use. The extra buffs on this patch may make him okay at the very highest of levels like Challenger and the Pro scene, but I think there are many other options that are a lot better, and anywhere under that, he's just stay away tier. Avoiding the champions on this list is a good starting point to rank up, but if you're actually serious about climbing, then you should check out ProGuides.com. Right now we're giving out free trials to anybody who signs up, so you can actually try out all of our services for yourself and decide if you think it's worth it. That includes access to all of our courses, and to make things even sweeter, when you sign up, you'll get a free coaching session. All you have to do is click the link in the description. This trial isn't going to last forever, so be sure to sign up now, so you can go ahead and stop spinning your wheels in solo queue and actually get good and start climbing that ladder. Now let's get back into the video. Our other top laner to avoid is Renekton. He's already not doing so great in solo queue, being hit pretty hard by the Q nerf back on 11.12. Well, due to him being such a safe top lane blind pick in pro play, along with his ability to be flexed to the mid lane, he's been hit with yet another nerf on this patch, this time seeing his stun on Empowered W being brought down from 1.5 seconds to 1 second flat. Renekton's entire identity is being a lane bully that should be able to win most matchups pretty hard, and then have the option to either build more damage and roll over the enemy team, or convert into a tankier or bruiser with the goal of being a solid frontliner in fights. But in reality, these nerfs just make it really difficult to even play the role of an early bully. After this change, I don't think playing him is just really justified in any situation. He'll be an even weaker laner, to the point that the lanes that he's supposed to be considered to have favored in, such as a Riven matchup, will be harder or even impossible against really good players. If you can't win lane on a lane bully that is meant to win and do well early, and fall off later, what's the point of the champion even existing? Looks like Crocs are back out of style. Other early game picks will be able to do the job better and more consistently, and in almost all cases will have better scaling as either side lane threats or team fighters one way or another. Now for the jungle, our first champion to talk about is Udyr. He pretty much underperforms in every way possible as a jungler. While Udyr does have okay early game ganks and skirmishing, okay doesn't cut it when you're dealing with the likes of OP champions like Xin Zhao and Rek'Sai in the jungle. They beat you 1v1, they gank better, and when it comes to fights later on, they're much more of a threat to carries than you'll ever be as Udyr. He does have them beat in clearing the jungle, but if we're talking about farming champions, compare him to other champions that fill that niche. Fiddlesticks and Karthus are pretty PvE focused in the early game and scales infinitely better than Udyr in teamfights. While he walks to targets and just kind of slaps them with stuns, those other guys can basically wipe out entire teams. He works well in the speed demon meta, but that's long behind us now, and it's time to let go of this guy who just runs in the woods. Though I'm sure some of you are diehard fans because of a certain streamer, and I can totally respect that, but maybe play him in normal games to get your Udyr fix on. Or if he does work for you, let us know how you're doing it down in the comments below. Almost every Udyr I see is completely useless, but there's that 1 in 100 that somehow solo destroys a game, and if that Udyr is you, I'd love to know your secret. Our other jungle pick is Gragas. Gragas has been a long time off and on pick in pro play as a jungler, but in recent times, starting sometime last season, he's been a lot more prevalent as a top laner. There have been different renditions of both AP and tanker builds on top of lane Gragas, but the general idea is pretty much always the same. Stack up as much CDR/ability haste as you can and be as disruptive as possible. He has a lot of trading power. With low enough cooldowns, E is basically up all the time, so his lane opponents never really get the chance to do anything to him. Gragas jungle, on the other hand, is on the other end of the spectrum. Much like Udyr, he just doesn't really excel in any field. His ganks at all stages are pretty mediocre, with the exception being when he has his flash up. But relying on a summoner spell to secure what is usually just a single kill every 5 minutes isn't nearly enough to compete with early game gankers like Rek'Sai and Shaco in solo queue. Buffing his clear speed alone isn't going to be doing much to fix that, but buffing him in any other way is going to make him better as a top laner and support, and will probably make him one of those super safe blind picks in pro play, since you can flex him in 3 ways. Next up, looking at the mid lane, our first champion is Azir. He's been one of our lowest ranked champions for quite a while now, and with this patch and the next being specifically aimed at balancing for worlds, you can expect it to stay that way for a while. Azir is one of those Akali tier champions. When he's doing okay or just barely even subpar in solo queue, he's usually an insanely dominant pro pick due to his very high skill ceiling. He ends up being a very high presence champion, and then we end up with the very resident sleeper Azir Corki handshake draft. So for now, do yourself a big favor and stay away from him. You have to work way too hard to get results with him. Personally, I'm kind of glad that Azir is out of the meta. When he is a good pick, laning against him is low interaction since he just clears waves and pokes with his shoulders, and eventually he just becomes a super big hyper carry that wipes teamfights. It's both boring and frustrating to play against. And that leads us to today's question of the day. What champion do you hate seeing in the meta and why? Let us know your answers in the comments down below. Now, without further ado, let's get back on track. Our second mid laner is Lucian. As we talked about last patch, Lucian's changes made him a much stronger bot lane carry, but hit him pretty hard as a solo laner. I've already pretty much considered him the worst solo laner overall in the game for months now, and the stats are there to prove it. His win rate in both lanes has hovered around the mid-40s for about as long as I can remember, and losing 2 base AD has made things even worse for him. He simply is too volatile of a champion, requiring constant babysitting to be useful. The only way to play Lucian is to go aggro and lane, which leaves him very susceptible to being camped. Without your own jungler backing you up consistently, you just end up falling behind, and once he's just a bit behind, he's pretty much out of the game. And even without being camped, he's simply not that good. Yeah, he can be really annoying to lane against in the first few levels, but once a mid laner like Kiana or Zed has her ultimate and a bit of lethality, they can easily go for an all-in. Once they do get that single kill, the snowball begins, and you're just as farmable as the rest of the minions. Now moving things down to the bottom lane, our first pick is Varus. He pretty much has been the bot lane version of Renekton. In pro play, his extreme lane dominance makes him one of the most popular picks, with there not really being a counter to him in a 2v2 situation. On 11.17, he was already performing well below average, with them taking away the base AD and nerfing the attack speed that he gets from killing minions on this patch. I think he's an easy pick for the worst champion in the role. His lane bullying will still be there, but there are plenty of other strong ADCs to fill that niche. Tristana has been the go-to pick for that, and has extreme snowball potential since she has insane range and can jump in over and over once she's ahead. Draven has already been doing pretty well recently, and the buff that he has for this patch will only help increase how often he snowballs. The one thing that he has over the early game bullies is his ability to engage fights with his ultimate, but Ashe has him beat in that regard by a long shot. And even if she is being nerfed this patch, it's a pretty light one, and I think she'll remain a top tier pick. Our other no-no ADC is Kaisa. She's actually one of my favorite champions of all time. She used to be an incredibly OP pick, dominating the meta for what seemed to be like ages after her release, but that's exactly why she's been nerfed into the ground. Traditionally, Kaisa has done really well as either a kill lane ADC when you pair her with a CC heavy support to utilize her passive, or a hard scaling hyper carry when paired with an enchanter. But her damage just doesn't really compare to the other early game aggro picks, so it's pretty hard to find those 2v2 wins. Her scaling also just doesn't compare to the stronger hyper carries in this role such as Vayne, Jinx, and Kog'Maw. The E cooldown reduction that she's getting does make navigating teamfights a little bit easier in the later stages of the game, but I don't think it's nearly enough to make up for how outclassed she is in the moment. If I really wanted her to be good, they would need to buff her up in the early game, and that would make her viable in kill lanes again. But the issue is that she becomes pick or ban in pro play, and as they've made clear, that's not what they want for Worlds this year. Like I said, Kaisa is one of my favorite champions of all time to see in games, but I doubt that she'll be getting much more love than this due to her pro play dominance. But how do you feel about that? Let me know if you like it when she's a top pick, or you prefer her being out of the meta for a while. Maybe they'll give her a buff when they release a new skin, who knows. Following our ADCs, we have our support, starting off with Misfortune. While we do try to keep our list focused on champions that are usually played in the role, and MF support may seem a little bit off meta, it's a more popular pick than you might think. About 8% of all MF games on 11.17 were played as support, so we feel the need to tell whoever you are to stop it. Please, it doesn't work. In lane, it does provide some annoying poke with the E, especially as you start to max it out for a heavier slow and much more damage, and you do have a little bit more kill potential with the ER combo being layered on top of any CC that your ADC may have, but that's about it. Out of lane, her damage falls off very quickly, and your ultimate doesn't end up being all that useful. Other poke champions like Zyra, Vel'Koz, and Seraph do a lot more, and they're more reliable as supports. Their poke reaches much further, so you're able to safely harass your opponents even under their tower. All three champions provide some form of CC, so they can peel for the ADC or themselves if needed, and all have better all-in combos. On top of that, out of lane, they scale much better. Other champions still provide really good poke even with just an item or two, while Zyra and Vel'Koz can wipe out entire enemy teams with their combos in a teamfight. While his rework has turned him into a demon in the top lane, easily bullying out just about any other champion in the role, everybody's favorite Catfish has been flopping as a support. Just like his pre-rework state, he just doesn't really provide anything useful as a support. In fact, because his E has been moved to his ultimate, therefore having a longer cooldown, it's been a pretty huge hit to support Tahm Kench. Without his ability to just gobble up an ally and just, run away, Tom's only hope is being against another melee support where he can just run at them and force 2v2 trades. And if you can't do that, you're just stuck waddling around, providing nothing more than your Q poke and essentially making your ADC 1v2 the lane. And if you end up against an especially oppressive 2v2 lane like Ashe or Jhin with a mage support, you're basically guaranteed to lose your tower by 10 minutes. We may see him being played in the role at Worlds depending on the bot lane meta, but trust me when I say this, you do not want him to be picked in your solo queue games. He's just going to tilt your ADC, which is essentially just a guaranteed loss because we know how ADCs are. Come on, I'm one too. Anyway, that about wraps up things for our 10 Worlds Champions on patch 11.18. I hope you guys enjoyed the video, and if you did, be sure to sub so you never miss out on our meta guides, and you're always in the loop on what the best picks are. Remember, let us know what champions you hate seeing in the meta down in the comments below. And one last thing, don't forget to check out our Discord in the description box below, where you can discuss League further or just hang out and be a part of the community. I can't wait to see you guys back in the Discord or in the next video. But until then, stay safe, stay healthy, and have a wonderful day. Peace.